Why do 70% of critical thinkers ditch Disney Plus? Because they found something better. In today's economy, every dollar counts. So what's worth subscribing to? Let's compare Disney Plus and no Soundbites Allowed. With Disney Plus, you're shelling out $140 a year for virtue signaling shows targeting mythical modern audiences. Plus, a theater visit could cost you $40 or more. Ouch. Now imagine a platform where fresh perspectives, insightful interviews, and engaging discussions are at your fingertips. That's no Soundbites Allowed. And the best part? It's free with an option to support only if you choose. While Disney Plus ticks off virtue signal checkboxes, no Soundbites Allowed offers real talk and sharp analysis. Perfect for those who crave depth and clarity. Why break the bank for entertainment? Subscribe to No Soundbites Allowed and enjoy meaningful content without the hefty price tag. All right, hello everybody, and I hope you're doing well tonight. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am your host, Michael Voss. I am here with you tonight, Tuesday, September 10th. It is currently 8 p.m., about an hour before the Trump, I'm just tongue-tied for the moment, Trump-Harris debate for the 2024 presidential election. It should be quite an event. It should be very interesting. So for the first hour here, we're going to be talking a little bit about everything leading up to the debate, everything leading up to what we're going to be seeing and hearing tonight. And we have some updates because after about 45 days, a month and a half of absolutely no written policies, we finally have the Kamala Harris policies. They were published late last night. We were looking through several of the policies today. We'll be talking about that over the next hour as we prepare to talk about and live stream the presidential debate and give you our thoughts during that debate. Might also check in on one of my friends, Larry Sharp, see what he's doing. I know he's covering this as well. And that we'll have a conversation. One of the most important things tonight, as always, is your voice from anywhere in the world. We know we have an international audience. No matter where you are, we want to hear what you think about what's being said in the debate, what's being said in the way it's going to affect our nation and the world. You can, of course, always reach us with super chats on both YouTube and on Rumble. This is simulcast on Rumble, on YouTube, and Facebook, and a few other places as well. So we're looking forward to hearing all of your comments about that. Separate of that, we're going to jump right in. Pretty much, give me 1 second. I'm just checking all of my various updates here. And one of the first things I want to mention for you is at this moment, as we can see by the Associated Press, right now in Philadelphia, there is a protest by pro-Hamas Democrats. Pro-Hamas Democrats are currently protesting, and let's take a listen. Earlier, they were angry with Donald Trump. I don't understand why, and I'll explain that in a second, but let's listen to what they're saying at this moment. Okay. Doesn't really sound, I believe it was back here. Yeah. Half an hour ago. Do you hear this? Do you hear what they're saying here? Okay. So half an hour ago, they were calling for intifada. That's a holy war. They're calling for a holy war. That's the only solution. That's anti-Semitic. That's what these pro-Hamas protesters, who are Democrats, that's what they're calling for. And I don't remember the exact minute where it was, but they were screaming about Donald Trump. This may be the section here.
Daughters. All the children, sons and daughters. All the parents, mothers and fathers. All the parents, mothers and fathers. We will honor all our martyrs. Israel, Israel, you will learn. Israel, Israel, you will learn. Palestine will be free. Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river. In our thousands, in our millions. In our thousands, in our millions. We are all Palestinian.
No, we're not all Palestinian, but just to give you a sense of what is happening right now in America, in particular in Philadelphia, ahead of the debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Now, in this coverage from the Associated Press, which again is live, and I was just going back about half an hour ago, they have been calling on Donald Trump. They're upset with Donald Trump about his positions. Now, it's kind of odd to me, and when I say that, it's because who's in charge? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I understand Joe Biden is a zombie part-time president. That people think I say that because I'm being mean. No, that's the accurate description. Joe Biden is obviously suffering from dementia. We saw that on the debate stage. It's the reason why Democrats have thrown him off of the ticket. So he is suffering mentally. And we know for a fact, it has been confirmed by all the international news media, Joe Biden only works between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. 5 days a week. He is a part-time zombie president. And that's who's in charge, along with the vice president, Kamala Harris, for 3.5 years. But yet, when we watch this protest and we've listened to it, and I've been listening to it for the last hour or so, they're angry with Donald Trump, who's not in charge. Donald Trump isn't making the policy. Donald Trump is not the one trying to get back the hostages because he's not in power. He's not president. But they're angry with him, which makes me think that this is such astroturf, that this isn't real. I don't know what this is, but it isn't real because they're angry at someone who isn't in charge, who can't make the decisions. The people who can, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. The people who are stopping the ceasefire in Gaza is Hamas. 12 times. 12 times they have refused to give back the hostages, including 19 Americans and 9 British citizens. They refused to give them back, which would guarantee them a ceasefire tomorrow. No, they'd rather scream about, well, as you can see on some of the signs, vote socialism. They're socialists. I'm not making that up. That's the sign. You can see it for yourself right there on the screen. And this is live from Associated Press. They want Israel to give up power. Israel isn't the problem. Israel agreed, give us back the hostages, you get a ceasefire. They're angry with Donald Trump. Donald Trump isn't in charge of America. So there's a disconnect that's going on here. And it doesn't make sense. Maybe they're trying to convince Kamala Harris that they're still politically relevant, that the Dearborn, Michigan voters, the Democrats there, that they're significant and they will have influence in this election. And maybe they're trying to bid up their power. I don't know. But I think it is worth... Oh, am I not showing you guys that? I thought I was. But I think that is important. So I have been showing you guys that, right? It's not just it was on my screen. I hope it was. But that's what's happening right now. That's what we see. That is the live situation. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted you to be aware because the mainstream news media doesn't like to show this. This is the same thing that was happening at the DNC, Democratic National Committee Convention in Chicago. 4,000 pro-Hamas protesters were there breaking down buildings, trying to break into the DNC. There was about 100 people who got arrested, and it's the same crowd. It's the same people saying the same things. They're calling for ceasefire, but they want Israel to give up its position. Israel doesn't have hostages. Israel isn't the one who's stopping the ceasefire and refusing to accept the hostages. That's Hamas. They're arguing about the wrong people, and they're trying to promote socialism. You saw the signs. I don't have to say it. So they're not democratic. They don't believe in the democratic process. Again, I don't need to say that. You can see the signs in the background right here in the upper right-hand corner. You can see the signs there. They're talking about voting for socialism. They're not Democrats, but yet they're part of the Democratic Party. Just tells you something. So, separate of that event that is happening as we speak, I want to also take a moment to say, okay, throughout the entire pre-coverage, the debate, even posts, let me know, who do you think should win the 2024 election? Who are you expecting to win the debate? Is that going to change your opinion about who you're going to vote for in November? That's all I want to know. That's something you can definitely talk about. I do have my phone line on right now, so you can call in at 929-715-8569. Again, that's 929-715-8569. I will be happy to have calls and to see your comments and your super chats. Okay, with that all said, last night, how do I get this set up? Let me make sure. First of all, we're going to be, just so you know, when I'm going to the live event, I will be going to C-SPAN, not ABC, not the Associated Press. I will be looking at coverage from C-SPAN because they are a neutral organization. So we're not going to get a bunch of commercials. We're not going to be getting a lot of other voices. We're going to just get the event. So I believe that's the most neutral source, and that's where I'll be getting my coverage from C-SPAN. That being said, so for 45 days now, month and a half, Kamala Harris has been anointed as the replacement for Joe Biden in the 2024 election. She has never been in a presidential primary, not once. She has never been someone that Democrats, rank and file Democrats, have ever voted for. This was an anointment. She was crowned and pushed into that position. Now, in May and in April and earlier this year, Democrats were publicly saying they wanted to replace Kamala Harris as vice president because they were dissatisfied with the job she was doing. Throughout the last 3.5 years, she has had a disapproval rating so high that even Dan Quayle, after his historic potato incident, had higher ratings. He was more liked as a vice president than Kamala Harris. And for those who are younger and don't know about that, look up the Dan Quayle potato incident. It was an absolute embarrassment for the vice president, Dan Quayle, at the time. And it was something that was mocked roundly, and it should have been. And even Kamala Harris had lower ratings than that. And Democrats, because of her failures with the southern border, her failures with South Korea, her failures in Europe, and, of course, dealing with all of South America, Central America, her absolute failure in every single objective placed before her made them want to replace her. Up until the American people realized Democrats were lying and that Joe Biden was not mentally fit to run for the presidency, which I would continue to say. He's also not fit to be president, and the 25th Amendment should be enacted to remove Joe Biden. He's not mentally fit, and we know this. We have seen this now. It is irrefutable. But when that became public, when everyone finally realized it, when the lie was uncovered, much like the laptop, 2.5 years after the fact, the lie became the truth. We found out the truth. And they had to replace Joe Biden. They were going to lose. It was going to be a landslide, and everyone knew it. So Democrats needed someone who could maintain some kind of motivation amongst Democratic voters. They need Democrats to come out and vote down the line. They need that down the line vote so that they can maintain their power in Congress and the Senate. And under Joe Biden, they were going to lose both houses. Republicans would have had a supermajority, the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives, and very much the inverse of what we saw with Obama's first year. And so Democrats were terrified of that. And of course, they would lose hundreds of millions of dollars. Donors shut down. Abigail Disney, amongst many others, said they just weren't going to donate to the Democratic Party anymore as long as Joe Biden was in. And when the money's not flowing, Washington, D.C. starts acting very, very quickly. These are all the facts that led up to Kamala Harris being anointed by the Democratic elites, not the people, not the rank and file, as they shouted about how this was about democracy, protecting democracy, and they put Kamala Harris in the least democratic process that has ever happened in the United States. No one except a small handful of elites had anything to do with it. Those elites being Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, and a few others. They all turned on Joe Biden and said they need to maintain power. Kamala Harris is now going to be the person. And she is. During that month and a half, as we ran through this transition that America has never seen before, Kamala Harris did one interview, only just recently with CNN. She turned down week after week, day after day, for over a month, turned down every single news media outlet. No matter how far left-leaning they were, no matter how friendly they had been and continue to be to the Democrats and the Biden-Harris administration, she said no. She finally did an interview with Dana Bash on CNN, and it was a puff piece. Lots of softballs. And everyone has roundly pointed out that that was a horrible interview. Not only because Kamala Harris answered nothing, literally answered no questions. She dodged virtually every single issue and provided no sense of what her policies actually were, but she had to bring her vice presidential pick, Tim Walz, with her to the interview. And I cannot think of a more clear example of someone who is weak. You look around the world at any election that you want to. There is no world leader who is being interviewed before an election that brings their number two, their vice president, their assistants. They never do that. It is always them because they are the leader. They are the strength of their movement. They have conviction in their beliefs. Kamala Harris had to bring Tim Walz. He was the distraction. He was there to save her. He was there to take away some of the time. In this 16-minute video interview that wasn't live, they had to tape it, so God knows how many times they had to do it over and over. The American people got to see that. These are the realities. This is what brings us to where we are today. So we have massive turmoil. Democrats, within the Democratic Party, there is turmoil. Democrats are upset because they didn't get any choices. There is no democracy that's being promoted by the Democratic Party at this time. That's just the reality. I know there are Democrats that don't like to face that reality. They don't want to feel that reality, but it is the truth. It is the reality. No matter how you want to feel about it, that is the truth. And we know that the most important issues facing America at this moment, according to Statistica, and with some minor variation, every poll has shown consistently that the American people believe that America has poor leadership right now and we need strong leaders. Joe Biden is not that. Kamala Harris has not been that. That immigration is a massive issue. Illegal immigration, not legal immigration. There is a difference. Illegal immigration that has brought 8 million illegal aliens into America. That is bankrupting cities like New York City, Boston, Chicago, LA, Detroit. Major cities across the country are falling apart. Their infrastructure are being just decimated, and Americans are being thrown out into the streets to take care of illegal aliens, and we can't afford it. That has been inflationary, making poor people even more poor. So this has been a big issue. Not to mention the fact that we have seen multiple times where these illegal aliens have attacked police officers, like at 42nd Street, where 11 illegal aliens attacked and beat up 2 police officers in broad daylight and then ran to California to avoid justice. That is happening. We've seen, 3, 4 women that have been killed by illegal aliens that should have been deported if ever let into the nation, and they weren't. And that led to these young women dying. This is a serious concern. So that's a big issue in America. The economy overall, and most people, whether you want to break it down into its various components, but in general, the economy is something that is massively important for most people. That would be inflation. The fact that depending on where you live in America, somewhere between a 40 to a 200% increase in the cost of food is something that you're experiencing every day when you go to the grocery store. And we have seen that confirmed over and over again. Everyone is aware that the news media will tell you it's only 20%, but look at your bills, your food bills, compare them to 2021, and you're looking at somewhere between 40 to 200% increase in the cost of food. And the Biden administration has never addressed that. Going on, homelessness, massive issue. We've heard about that in California for many years now, that they're just defecating in the middle of the streets, massive homeless problem, and it is going into other cities as well. New York is experiencing that. Chicago, it seems to be going hand in hand with the open borders and the illegal immigration, that we're getting even more homelessness as a side result. Our court system, our laws are something that many people are concerned about. The election, having confidence in our elections, was shot after 2020 with the many changes to election law, the many disputes about election law, the absolute denial by Democrats to have any kind of audits to reconfirm or reinstill a sense of confidence in our elections. They just rejected that wholesale, and that has continued to affect Americans and our trust of our election system. Race and racism is up there for a lot of people because that's what is the bread and butter of the modern Democratic Party. They have been, the progressive movement lives and breathes and eats nothing but division, equity, intersectionality. That is their thing. They are constantly talking about racism, sexism, every ism and every phobe you could possibly think of. That is the whole woke movement. And that is a Democratic thing, which means that has now been injected into everything. We see that in our entertainment, whether you're looking at a basketball game, whether you're going to the movies, whether you're watching a TV show, if you're in school, in every aspect of our lives, the woke progressive movement have injected race and equity into every aspect of our lives, which is very upsetting, I think. You may disagree, but I'm trying to make sure we're talking about what we expect in this debate. Bear with me. Sorry, I'm just checking my messages here, just in case someone's calling in. And so that's kind of interesting to make sure we understand that. And the last thing is crime and violence. And again, many of these things are interconnected. When you have inflation so high, people can't afford food for themselves and their kids and their family. When you have illegal aliens getting better treatment than American people. When crime and laws don't seem to apply because of someone's color of skin, because of their sexual preference. For many reasons, the law is uneven in its application on who gets to be charged with the crime and how they get to be charged with the crime. When you have that environment, crime increases, especially when you then also have a revolving door. Bail reform, which has gone across the country. It was a Democratic initiative in 2020. We saw it executed in 2021 and beyond. And what has that led to? Repeat crimes. The same criminals repeating crimes over and over again. And I don't just mean once or twice, we're talking about 15 times. It's been ridiculous. And that has been a massive concern for many, many people. Lesser issues are the national debt, which again affects inflation, unemployment, which is an offshoot of the economy, but that has been increasing. Unemployment is going up. This is, again, on the Biden-Harris administration. They don't like to talk about it. And wages. Wages have been frozen under the Biden-Harris administration. They're not increasing. Even though we're told, oh, well, we'll just have a $15 minimum wage. We'll have a $25. In California, there are Democratic Senate candidates who are now offering, Representative Barbara Lee of California is suggesting a $50 minimum wage. Now, the result of that has been over 10,000 restaurants and fast food places closed and fired their employees. 10,000 people were left unemployed because California bought into the higher minimum wage, forcing that onto their businesses, and the businesses closed. Because that's always what happens when you have the government forcing this artificial minimum wage, this living wage, onto businesses. Businesses close. They can't afford it. And people get fired. And it doesn't work. It never has worked. It's exactly what we have seen predicted by the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, and we have covered that 4 times that they have reviewed this. 4 times they have told you if you go with a minimum wage of $15, $25, $50, you will have massive unemployment and businesses will close. It will hurt the poor more than it will help. And every time we have seen it done, whether it's in Manhattan or in Washington State or California, every single time it has been proven it doesn't work. These are the elements that bring us to the debate today. These are the things that Americans are interested in. Now, that brings me to Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has had her website up for a month and a half, approximately 45 days. And on that website, she is asked for 44 out of 45 days. She simply asked for, give her money, give her your vote, and she gave back to Democrats and to the American people her bio. That was it. Then she got her running mate, her VP, Tim Walz. So she updated the website, and it was Tim's. Tim Walz had his bio, it had Kamala Harris's bio, and it begged for money. Whether you're buying merchandise or just making donations or you volunteer, they wanted your vote, they wanted your work, and they wanted your money, but they gave you nothing for it. Only until yesterday did we finally get issues. The first time. And the issues are very interesting. As an example, cut taxes for middle-class families. Now, I looked at a couple of these issues, and I actually put that into actually counted the words. So, illegal immigration, that is the highest rated issue that she has on her page. She doesn't talk about the fact that Americans don't trust Joe Biden or her because they have lied to the American people about Afghanistan. They lied about what's happened in the Sudan. They ignored Haiti. They have failed in international politics and U.S. domestic politics. And they lied about Joe Biden being a mental giant. They lied. So obviously people have a trust issue there. But she doesn't address that. But the first thing and the biggest thing she talks about is illegal immigration, which I will show you. This is her website, and illegal immigration is there it is. Secure our borders and fix our broken immigration system. This was the job given to Kamala Harris on March 24th, 2021. March 24th, 2021. She has had 3.5 years to fix our border and secure it, to close the border, which we already have laws in place to deal with. All she has to do is enforce the existing law. That's what the Biden-Harris administration has not done for 3.5 years. They could fix this tomorrow. All they have to do is enforce the law that already exists, close the border. They could do it. They haven't. Kamala Harris decided that she would finally tell people what's her position, and she doesn't explain how she has failed the American people, how she has failed as the borders are. In fact, she's tried to use the news media to whitewash her record and to ignore the fact that she was hired, that she was given the position March 24th of 2021 to fix this problem. She ignores that completely. And she wants to tell us about how she was Attorney General of California, that she was very effective on the state level, and that this is a problem because of Congress, even though we already have immigration laws in place. We already have asylum laws in place. No, she wants to blame it on Congress failed, and she was great in California, and Donald Trump is the bad guy. Orange man bad. That's why we have fentanyl in America, because of Donald Trump, who isn't president, who isn't in charge of the border, who doesn't have any political power. It's all his fault, not hers. Well, when I looked at this, she literally says she has 188 words in her response about illegal immigration. This is her position. If you strip out everything that isn't an actual policy, strip out her history about California and being the Attorney General, strip out the attack on Orange Man bad, strip out the fact that her calling it, saying that it's Congress that's at fault, strip all that stuff out, and her actual substantive position is one sentence. One sentence. And that sentence is, as president, Kamala Harris will bring back the bipartisan border security bill and sign it into law. That's her policy. Not the rest of the word salad, not the rest of the gobbledygook meant to distract you. It's one sentence. She's going to go to Congress and present the bipartisan border security bill that doesn't close the border, that doesn't secure the border. It just slows down the number of illegal aliens entering America from somewhere around 6,000 illegal aliens a day to 1,500 illegal aliens a day. She's going to slow down the number of illegal aliens entering America, but she won't close the border. She won't resolve the problem. And she needs Congress to change the law rather than enforce the law that already exists. That's what the chief executive does. That's what the executive branch is for. They enforce the law that exists. They don't make law. They don't change law. They enforce the law that exists. And she says her answer is she's going to try and change the law. That's her only answer for illegal immigration. She doesn't have an answer on why she hasn't done it already. She doesn't have an answer on how she has failed. That 8 million illegal aliens entered into America, and there has been a 3,400% increase. Let me say it again. 3,400% increase in the number of known and suspected terrorists that have entered America since Kamala Harris was put in charge of the southern border. There are 378 known or suspected terrorists that entered into America, several of them that have been caught trying to get to New York and California so they could attack and kill innocent American citizens. We know this. We've caught them. They have admitted that. They have been members of Hezbollah and the Houthis and Hamas and ISIS. We have caught them. They have admitted this. This is all under Kamala Harris's shepherding of the southern border. And her only answer is, if I get elected as president, I will present a bill to Congress. I think that's piss poor. I think that's a horrible response. I think it does nothing for anyone. But that's kind of like how she answers everything. Because when it comes to the economy, her answer, 275 words, there's only 73 words of actual substance, 26% of it. She has basically 4 sentences. She's going to have the child tax credit, an earned income tax credit, which is inflationary. She's going to print more money to give to Americans so that there's going to be more inflation and everything will be more expensive for those same parents, for every single American. She's going to increase inflation because she has no understanding of the economy. That's her answer. That makes no sense. And she's going to tax businesses who can take their money outside of the United States. They did it under Bill Clinton. They did it under Barack Obama. They've done it under Joe Biden. They'll just go to another country. They move the money and they take the business with them. We've been seeing this same idea attempted in New York State under Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul, the governors of New York. They tried it too. We'll just tax the rich. The rich left. They took their money, they took their businesses, and they went somewhere else. The hyper-rich will do the same thing in the United States because they did it in the past. It was only under the Trump administration that they were bringing business and money back into America because we cut the taxes. But Kamala Harris is a super genius. She goes on when talking about the banks. How is she going to help people when it comes to food prices? Well, that answer was 176 words on her website. And the words that actually matter, 39. Only 22% of the words actually apply to a policy. And that is that she is going to call for the first ever ban on price gouging. 37 states already have this. This is already in place. No state is going after any business for price gouging on food. If price gouging was the reason why food prices have doubled, we would see at least one of those 37 states actually filing a lawsuit. They're not, because price gouging isn't the problem. Price gouging isn't the root cause of the inflation. The policies, Bidenomics, is. So she's promising to waste your time, to be ineffective, to be inefficient, to waste federal money, and to grow the size of the government, but that will have zero impact on your life. That's what she has said. She will also, she says, take on big pharma to lower drug prices and cap insulin costs. Well, I thought Joe Biden already did that. In fact, the first day Joe Biden was in office, he reversed an executive order from Donald Trump that did cap the cost of insulin. And Joe Biden removed that cap on the cost of insulin. And then, a year and a half after the fact, he then said, I'm going to now put in an executive order to cap the cost of insulin, to do exactly what Donald Trump had already done. So now Kamala Harris is taking credit for something that Joe Biden did, but she won't take any credit for harming people with insulin, increasing the cost of insulin from the Trump administration into the Biden-Harris administration. She won't take the blame for that, but she wants the credit for capping insulin costs that she didn't do. Joe Biden did that. Do you see a trend here? She wants to talk about crime, and she loves to talk about her time as district attorney and attorney general. She doesn't mention the fact that she was bailing out members of Antifa as they committed created autonomous zones like the Chaz, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where children were killed. Yeah, she was bailing out these individuals. The people who were burning down Minneapolis cost $2 billion, has devastated lives and families for decades, and she was bailing them out. That's what the prosecutor in chief that she wants to call herself, she was bailing out criminals who committed arson and sexual assault and were attacking people, violence and rioting. She's bailing them out. And every autonomous zone is an insurrectionist zone. That is an insurrectionist uprising. They violate every local, state, and federal law. And she supports that. And she wants to tell us that she's going to be the crime czar, that she's going to be hard on crime because she's a district attorney. There is no evidence of that. She spends 285 words talking about how great she was in California, but she only has 67 words to tell you that what she's going to do for America if she were to be elected. One of the other things she has to say is she's going to ban certain types of firearms, which is what Democrats have promised to do for 50 years. They have been trying to ban and remove people's Second Amendment rights for 50 years, half a century, and it has never worked. In varying degrees, they have succeeded in that, whether it's red flag laws or the New York SAFE Act, H.R. 127. They have tried multiple bills and laws and restrictions, and none of them have worked. The American people are not safer today than they were 4 years ago. That is a fact. But they have banned and made it illegal to have bulletproof vests and passive personal self-defense. Hasn't helped. Nothing they have done has helped, but they keep saying the same things over and over again. That's what Kamala Harris has been offering the American people. The same story over and over again. There is no substance that she has provided. We understand why she's avoided telling anyone. Because when you actually look at this and analyze what she has said, there is no substance there. Everything she is suggesting doesn't work. It is either a repeat of a policy 5 decades old, or it is a policy that doesn't make sense because it cannot achieve the goal that she promises it will have. It is illogical. It just cannot happen. But this is what we are seeing from Kamala Harris. Now, taking that summary, because we look backwards in time, we remember the past so we can understand what's happening today and project what's going to happen in the future. We have always done that. We do that every week on the Sunday live stream. And we know, as we spoke about on the Sunday live stream this week, we just talked about, we know that illegal aliens are voting in our elections. The United States government, the Biden-Harris administration, just arrested a woman because she was a Guatemalan who was voting in the 2016 and the 2020 and the 2022 election. And she was voting Democrat because illegal aliens aren't going to vote for Republicans. They want to close the border. They want to deport Guatemalans who are illegally in America. No, she was voting Democrat because Democrats promised to keep the border open, to spend $60,000 per illegal alien to put them into hotels, even as the American citizens are being kicked out onto the street. These are facts. So we know that part of the reason why Democrats want these illegal aliens is even if only 1% of the illegal aliens are voting in our elections, then that's an extra 800,000 votes they get across the entire country. That's enough to change an entire election. That is enough to win various states across America, multiple states. Even if it's 0.5%, well, that would be 400,000 votes. Again, enough to win any one election in almost any state and to win multiple states. It's too many votes. If it's even 0.25%, you're talking about 200,000 votes. Again, more than enough to win multiple states and keep Democrats in power. That's the problem. So I wanted to bring all of that up, and I know we have only about 15 minutes. 15 minutes before the show starts, before the debate starts. And I find this important because we finally have context. She has been hiding from the American people. Kamala Harris has actively been the blank slate. She has put herself up, and I've listened to Democrats' various programs of talking about this. Kamala Harris said nothing so that everyone could say, well, she's going to do this. They injected and projected their ideology on Kamala Harris so that they could feel like they were being heard. She never said that. She never gave them, she never said what her policies were. So people would just imagine, well, she must want to take care of my issue. No, otherwise she would put it in writing. And as we can see from what she did put in writing, no, she's not supporting the far left. She's not supporting the progressive movement that she relied on in 2019. She's flip-flopped on fracking and energy. She's flip-flopped on many of her issues that she said in 2019, and now here it is in 2024, and she has the exact opposite position. That she wants to tell you, oh, no, I changed my position in 2020. No, you didn't. You told us what Joe Biden believes. When she joined the Biden ticket as his vice president, she promoted Joe Biden's points of view. She never changed her points of view. That didn't happen until now, in the last 45 days. So I bring all of these things up so that we can understand with some clarity what we should expect in the debate tonight. We know where Donald Trump stands. Donald Trump has been very consistent in what he believes and what he is telling the American people. He has been hyper consistent in what he believes and what he has been telling the American people. And I can prove that to you if we take a look at the polling, which currently only has Kamala Harris on a head-to-head, just Democrat versus Republican. Kamala is currently up 1.1%. She has lost virtually all of her momentum. As you can see, she has plateaued over the last roughly 30 days. That all the hype has it's not getting her more attention. She's not getting more support. She's done. This is as good as it gets, and that's about 47%, in fact. But what we have seen is Donald Trump has been consistently maintaining support. If we look over the last 2 years, he has consistently been increasing the number of people that support him. That's Donald Trump's growth line. He's been growing. Now, if we look at what is the realistic election, which is 5 candidates, so that's Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, RFK, Chase Oliver, Jill Stein, and Dr. Cornel West, looking at all the candidates that are actually going to be on ballots across this nation. Well, Kamala Harris supposedly is doing slightly better, but take a look. Again, you can see as clear as day, her support has flatlined. There is no growth. She's at the peak. She can only go downhill. And that's because she hasn't told anyone anything about what she actually believes. She's at about 47%. That's her margin. Mind you, Donald Trump is within the margin of error. He's at about 45%. He's about 2 points behind. So this is anyone's race, essentially. But the fact that Donald Trump has only been growing his base and has consistently been growing his base over time. He hasn't lost any of his supporters, as he told us what his positions are, where he stands, what he wants to do, and he has a track record that confirms what he has been saying. Something that the mainstream news media doesn't like repeating is that Donald Trump in 2024 is consistent with Donald Trump in 2020 and 2016. He believes the same policies. He believes the same issues. He's moving in the same direction from 2016 to today in 2024. Kamala Harris is flip-flopped. She's everywhere. Joe Biden has failed. He's flip-flopped. But Donald Trump has been consistent, which is why he has not lost his support. It's been very consistent, and it has been slowly growing. I expect that as we look at the debate tonight, we're going to see that continue. I do not think that Kamala Harris, that ABC News, will ask a tough question about foreign policy. They have to ask about Gaza, because we now know Kamala Harris is working every day to get the hostages back, which means she has failed for the last 45 days, if not for the last year, because she's working on this. It's her number one priority, according to Kamala Harris. Getting American hostages back is her priority. Well, she has failed in that priority. That is a fact. ABC will not point that out. They won't ask her the tough question on that. But they probably will ask her, will she continue to support Israel? And her answer will be yes, which means she will lose some of those supporters, including the protesters outside in Philadelphia right now. She will lose the Dearborn, Michigan vote, which means she's in trouble because she needs Michigan. She needs the progressive pro-Hamas voters to be able to win this election. She's going to lose them when she says she's going to support Israel. We're going to see, and we should have more questions about what's happening with Ukraine. Joe Biden has suggested that we will back Ukraine in a war for 10 years in a row. Does Kamala Harris have that same point of view? Does she want to support and have the proxy war of Ukraine versus Russia for the next decade? Will she put American troops into the Ukraine like NATO and France have been begging America to do? Will she bow to that pressure? She hasn't answered that question. The news media doesn't want to ask her that. It is important. What is she going to do about China? The Philippines have been begging the United States for support. She has not responded. Joe Biden has not responded. What will she do to assure our allies in Southeast Asia that America will live up to its treaties? I mean, why is Japan building an army, the first one since 1945? Because they do not trust Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. What will she do to convince them? I don't think they're going to ask that question, and I don't think she has an answer for that. But I do believe that Donald Trump does. Yet another reason why they won't ask about these three regions and what's going to be done. I do not believe that they're going to ask a serious question about Kamala Harris's policy for price gouging, how to deal with food inflation. They're not going to ask her the details on how that's going to improve the quality of, lower the price of food for the American people. They're not going to be questioning her on her policies. I do think they will question Donald Trump on his policies. They're not going to address the question, well, if she's going to just toss money at the problems like the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, she's going to just print money and throw money at the problem. That's going to be inflationary. That will hurt poor people. I don't think ABC will follow that up. They will just accept it. But I think they will attack Donald Trump for not doing the same, for not having an answer. Okay, we've got about 6 minutes left. Let me take a quick look. I want to see what my buddy, I'm going to be checking out Larry Sharp for a quick minute. I want to hear what he has to say about what's been happening.
That. I wish I had done that. I probably could have. I could have put it out someplace and had you guys grab it. I probably should have done that. I didn't even think about it. This is my first time doing a debate live. I don't usually do it live, right? I don't usually do it live, so not bad. Yeah. Sassy D says, Larry was thinking maybe Bobby's telling us to vote for Trump in every state to throw off Dems and stop the crazy lawsuits. Your thoughts? No. He just believes it. Nope. He believes it. Rocket Man says, abortion's low priority. Yes, but let me give you a but on this one, Rocket Man. It's true. If you look at what people in polls talk about with their prior issues, important issues, abortion is never high on the list. That's true. But man, it is a really important emotional issue, like really important emotional issue. It makes women feel like you support them or you don't. Not all women. I'm exaggerating. Many women. How about that? It makes many women feel like you. People look at your stance on abortion, women do specifically, and very often think, are you pro-woman or anti-woman? Now, to be very clear, I am not saying if you're pro-choice that you're by default pro-woman. I'm not saying if you're pro-life, you're by default anti-woman. What I'm saying is emotionally, many people feel that. So that's what I've done. Yeah, that's where I stand on that. That's where I stand on that. So yeah. Yes. Ryan says, I watched the debate between Larry and Howie Hawkins modded by Chrissy Mayer. Great job by all three. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. Yes, absolutely. So, Roy says, we should ask him why he thinks the government should have a say in what women do with their bodies.
So my good friend Larry Sharp right now, who is a libertarian, I notice he's getting asked some very interesting questions about women's issues, about abortion. Some of the questions that I haven't addressed, but I don't think,
if there's no
as
way
you
of
can
going
see,
back and forth,
when we looked at the ranking of
and then Trump can't respond
the most
to it,
important issues for the American people,
yeah.
Abortion's not on the
Jacob
list.
Says Harris and
it's
Biden
not
made the virus
one of the
situation worse,
issues
though.
that people
yes,
are
but that's
worried
the
about.
excuse, Jake. I'm not
because
saying
it's on a
state
by state basis.
That's the way they,
we already
that
have the
spins
answer.
It, right? She has to spin it. That's the reason. Right? That's the issue. Pete says, will there be anything on the millions of lives ruined by lockdowns? No. Childhood delays, depression, suicides to the roof? No.
No.
Rampant violent crime across the country? Yes, and they'll blame each other for that one. Working class absolutely decimated by inflation, larger transfer of wealth in human history but the rich? Yes, but they'll blame each other for that one. That they're both responsible for. Everything you said is true, and they'll only talk about the last two, and they'll blame each other for it. That's how it will actually manifest itself. That's what will actually happen. So, yes, absolutely. Guys, just to be clear, make sure you click the like button. It's going to start in about 5 minutes or so.
Yes.
Click the like button. I'm going to put it on. We'll let's do it together.
Like Larry.
In addition, if you're watching this on Twitter or Facebook, retweet, share this so other people can see it. It does matter. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, why do you?
Okay. So I find it interesting because Larry, who's a good friend of mine, is a libertarian. So he has a different viewpoint on many of these issues. But it's interesting to hear that he's also along the same track. He has a similar point of view that I do, that most of the serious questions that the American people have based on the history of what we have seen are not going to be asked. That ABC News, the mainstream news media, is not interested in presenting the American people with, or rather the candidates, with the questions that the American people have. They're just going to push their agenda. They're going to push their political parties. This is propaganda. And I think that Donald Trump was correct when he said he's not going to get a fair treatment by ABC News because they're pushing the propaganda line. They're pushing the political agenda, not asking what the American people want to know. That's what I believe. But of course, I'm always interested in hearing what you have to say. Again, you can call in to 929-715-8569, or you can leave a super chat on YouTube and or Rumble, or of course, you can just leave a regular chat. I'm always interested in hearing your voices, and of course, I do want to hear who do you think is winning. As we go through the debate, as we listen to what's being said, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear your voices on this, okay? And tell me who you think. Because we know what the news media will say tomorrow. In an hour and a half from now, we're going to hear CNN say that Kamala Harris has won. You're going to hear the left-leaning news media. They're going to say Kamala Harris absolutely won. It was fine. They said the same thing about Joe Biden. Literally, immediately afterwards, many of them were coming out and saying Joe Biden won. You're going to hear them say that as well. Kamala Harris is obviously, if the more left you are or the more left-leaning the news source, you're going to hear them say Kamala Harris won, no matter what. But that doesn't mean that's the truth. That's going to be the political message that they're going to put out. So, I believe we're going to be starting up right about now. Let's see.
Thank you to the cable and satellite companies who provide C-SPAN to viewers as a public service.
Face-to-face meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing out.
Okay, so they're still talking about getting everything ready. Once it starts, I'll of course be showing this in full. We are looking at, this is going to be presented by, it's simulcast with ABC News and C-SPAN. We are going to the C-SPAN coverage because, well, they're neutral and they're the best. So it's going to be starting in any moment. Obviously, we'll be responding to some of the comments from both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris when they have a good answer, when they don't. I look forward to hearing your comments as we go through this.
And Lindsay Davis.
Good evening, I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's ABC News presidential debate. We want to welcome viewers watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race.
It'll be consequential for Kamala Harris, not so much for Donald Trump. Donald Trump can have a bad debate and he will still be okay. Kamala Harris can't. She has to be stellar. She has to be strong unequivocally. Nope.
Turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for two candidates who have never met.
There should have been an audience.
He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Here we go. I'm going to turn up the volume a little bit. I want to make sure everyone can hear.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
She raced over to him, didn't she?
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their #1 issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
No.
To the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
Of course not.
So I
can't say
was
that.
raised as a middle-class kid.
No one cares.
And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
That's not the question you
I
asked.
believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people.
That's not what he
And
asked.
that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's
That's
the
not
thing.
what he asked.
We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families.
She didn't answer the question. She's avoiding answering the question.
Tax credit that we have given in a long time so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me.
She is literally reading off all of the answers, all of the policy positions on her website right now. She's reading them all off.
A $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide.
This is literally everything on her website right now.
Will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month.
But has Bidenomics made things better? That's the question. Did Bidenomics work? The answer is unequivocally no, which is why she doesn't want to address the question she was asked.
What should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires?
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history.
True.
At 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher.
Accurate.
Just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions.
Okay, now he's going off topic.
They're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at...
Look at Kamala's face. She is pissed off. She's angry.
Taking over buildings. They're going in violently.
It's the first question. She's pissed off.
Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Not true. That's the lockdowns. That was global. That is a lie.
Epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
That is a lie.
What we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate,
By lying?
you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook,
The Democratic playbook.
grievances and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again.
No different than Democratic playbook every year.
American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I
Because
did
he's actually
before.
dealing with the
We had the
question.
greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million.
Notice he's adding in context that Kamala Harris refused to put in. He just lost money. No, it was the lockdowns.
Was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and
That's true. That is correct.
but I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look
That's not what he just said.
at the plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse.
They also said that Joe Biden is a genius and that Bidenomics would work, and it hasn't. So that's suspect.
Deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
We're already in a recession. We've been in a recession since August of 2022.
You to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's such a lie.
They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes.
I showed you that.
She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
I showed you that before we started. It's true. She doesn't have a plan.
The president brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration.
Oops.
We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America.
That's what we asked you.
He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency,
and she didn't change it. Neither Biden nor Harris changed the policy.
Improved and modernized their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires.
Then why didn't you change the tariff policy? If it's so terrible, why did you keep the policy the same?
We win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving.
But you didn't change the tariffs. The question was about the tariffs. Why didn't you change the tariffs?
Taiwan, we hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But
That's funny.
if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's.
Do you notice how emotional Kamala Harris has been since the beginning? And she's overemphasizing her emotions. She's being very flagrant about her emotions right now. And we've seen Donald Trump be very stoic. I think that's not going to play well for Kamala Harris.
The New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times.
Abortion, as I showed you, is not the top 10 issue in America. It just isn't. Democrats love it. It's not.
They have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that,
he did, in fact, say that.
because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Yes. Very important.
True.
But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart.
It's states' rights, and it's only torn us up because Democrats keep pushing it. It's not a big issue.
All wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing.
For a party that the Democrats want you to be in charge of your body, but they want the right as a federal government to control your body.
Where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court.
We got here because Democrats, even with a supermajority under the Obama administration, did not codify Roe v. Wade. That's how we got here. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. They had 52 years to make it a law. They never did because they like the argument. They don't want the solution. That is the fact. It's not Orange Man bad. It's Democrats don't care. Let's be honest.
Of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral.
What about the body of the baby? It's not the woman's body, it's the baby's body. Doesn't that baby have a right to life? Democrats never want to talk about it. That's why they call the baby a fetus. They do not want to talk about this.
Around our country, you want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot? She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term?
Did not Trump just say he believes in the exceptions for a woman's life to incest? Didn't he just go over and say that, and all 85% of all Republicans agree with that? Did he not? She's not listening to what he said.
If Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his
He said he won't.
there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban.
Unless it's a decision to force you to get an experimental jab. Then Democrats don't care about your rights.
Republicans and everybody else and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to
Well, I
your
won't
desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about it.
It does sound like, so far, I think Trump is dominating.
Has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with JD. In all fairness, JD, and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come.
Well, again, Democrats didn't codify Roe v. Wade for 52 years. Why do we think they're going to codify it next year? They're not. It's just not realistic.
Wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government, and we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade, and as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion.
That's not true. That's not true, and that's why New York State allows abortion up to the moment of birth. It does happen.
Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatment.
New York, California, and many other states do have abortion up to the moment of birth. She knows this is true. She doesn't want to talk about it.
Can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers.
IVF is not a right. It is an option. It is a choice. It is a medical purchase. So, not the same thing.
Of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I
thank
have
you.
to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got
IVF is an option that individuals may choose, but again, we're talking about a hyper minority of the number of people who get pregnant and either choose to have an abortion or not. Again, very separate subject, but they're trying to mix the emotions on these issues.
you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her
Why-
that question?
why don't you
That's
answer
the
the
problem.
question, would you
Because under
veto?
Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question,
you
would you
could
veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia.
Governor Northam.
Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's
She
an
knows
issue
she
that's
screwed
important to
up on that. Did you
Republicans,
see her
Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America.
In other words, borders are.
Border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This
You
past
failed.
June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum
Look at her
restrictions.
face.
We know the numbers since
She's
then have
pissed
dropped
off.
significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations
cares about your
for the
history.
trafficking of guns.
No one cares about her history.
And let me say that the United States Congress, including
No one cares about what you did in California. This isn't about what Congress did or didn't do. What did you do as the borders are? She's avoiding the question.
agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job, it would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are some
She's blaming everyone except herself. Her job was to not allow 8 million more illegal aliens into America, and she is distracting from that.
criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions.
She has not answered the question at all, not in substance, not even in glancing at it. She's run away from it.
Problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going
You're going to talk about race when it's not the subject that's being raised.
to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch.
Actually, I have.
You will see
Several.
during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of
No, they
exhaustion
really
and
don't.
boredom. And
was
I
in
will
the
tell you, the
box.
one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about
That's not true. I've been to his rallies. That's not a true thing.
believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice
No, she won't.
Thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and
That would be in New Hampshire.
them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. Not going to
She's upset. She knows she's hurt. She knows she's in trouble.
embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I
Camera's acting
say.
out for a
They
second
want to
there.
bring our country back. They want to make America
Look at
great
those
again. It's a very simple
hyper
phrase. Make America great again. She's destroying this.
Look at the hyper reactions of, again, look at the emotional range, the acting that we are seeing from Kamala Harris. That isn't genuine reactions. Look at how exaggerated her reactions are.
And ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well,
All
I've
this-
seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
The people on
this is
television
a clear-
say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good
Yeah.
thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
But the
television.
people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying their
manager.
dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice
We'll
President
find
Harris,
out.
I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why.
Just because the media doesn't tell you something doesn't mean it isn't true. They said that the laptop was fake, and yet it was true. They told us Russia was real, and it was a lie. So saying that some politician isn't telling you the answer doesn't mean that they have been accurate.
I want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already. Just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and
Wait a minute. General Miley is the one who called China behind Donald Trump's back, colluding with our enemy. So some of the people she's pointing to aren't the best characters at all.
to this kind of rhetoric when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed. I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond
Yeah.
here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were
look at her
just
face
killed,
now.
viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far.
Sure.
In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
It's also true.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S.
With local
military.
police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah. It is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done.
To be fair, can we deport all 11 million, actually 20 to 25 million illegal aliens in America at this time? Probably not. We can deport some of them. Get all of them? No, not likely, and it will be expensive, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Germany is doing it. UK is doing it. They're sending them to Rwanda. It can be done in the United States. It's just not going to be easy.
Overall, violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse
President
me,
Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud, just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice
He is
President.
correct
Well,
on
I
that.
think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for
Kangaroo court.
crimes, economic crimes,
Kangaroo court, and even Democrats agree with that.
libel for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
Democrats could have sentenced him sooner. They chose not to.
Stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired
slogan
and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we
No, you don't.
to support our small businesses,
No, you don't.
address bringing down the price of groceries.
Oh, God, you don't.
But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice
That's not
President
true.
Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And
Yes.
I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department.
correct.
Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General.
You're right, Grace. I see your comments there. Her face is, one, she's acting. She's overemphasizing all of her emotions. And I don't think that's working for her. That may be because she's been working with Hollywood producers to prepare for tonight, but I think she's doing a bad job.
The toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're
President Trump-
fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would
Fani Willis and Letitia James have both said that they were directly targeting Donald Trump. In fact, they ran and got elected because they were targeting Donald Trump. And that's what they went after. So, yes, he has a point here.
of justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand.
Donald Trump has never been shown to be disdainful of the American military. Never.
Because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice
to
President
stop
Harris.
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump,
Russia investigation
We do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
Oh, good.
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every
serious
one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020.
No, you didn't.
I will not ban fracking.
Not true.
I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States, and
You
in
didn't have
fact,
a choice.
I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking.
No. it really
My
didn't.
position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign
That's
oil.
not true.
As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother
Who cares?
who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager.
Who cares?
The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times.
How many businesses did
is
you
a
open?
value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3
No, you
million
won't.
homes by the end of my first
Then
term.
why didn't you do it
My
already?
work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was
This has
sexually
nothing to
assaulted
do
by
with
her
why you
stepfather.
flip-flopped.
And my
She is avoiding why did you flip-flop on your positions. She isn't answering that.
that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare.
That doesn't answer why did you flip-flop on your issues. It was a very clear, very direct answer. She isn't answering it.
Values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down.
But your policies changed. I don't care about your values. Your policies changed. Why?
The strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well, first of all, I
response?
wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave
True.
all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went
She
out.
was.
Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Ooh.
She went out.
She didn't like that.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and
Oh,
raised
she's
money to
pissed.
get them out of jail.
She's pissed
She
now.
did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. They took,
That's
when
true.
they took over, they got rid of it, started
killed
getting
the
rid of
XL
it,
pipeline
and the
immediately.
prices were going up the roof. They
Yes, they were.
immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what
That's
happened
true.
to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar. but they take 400,
President
500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get to.
environment,
We're
as she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy and the
Which
role
Trump
of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to
God.
march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them.
This has nothing to do with America.
What played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world.
Okay, he is correct, but he is dodging a bit. Let's be honest. He is dodging a bit on this.
People are going to be prosecuted. When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of...
That's the Chaz, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. Autonomous zones are insurrectionists.
The president, you were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me.
What about the video from Nancy Pelosi in her limo on January 6th saying it was Nancy Pelosi's fault? That exists. We know this. Why are they beating up Trump for something Nancy Pelosi says it was her fault?
But they want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi. But I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital.
That's a lie.
To desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died.
No,
and understand,
they didn't die because of that.
The former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that
not
reason.
Convicted.
But
not
this
once.
is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches.
Charlottesville, really?
Spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say?
Go ahead, push
there were
the
fine
lie.
people on each side.
That's what he said.
Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia,
excluded the
president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by.
This has been debunked.
So for everyone watching who
multiple times.
remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos. And
what about the rules of our border and immigration? She doesn't stand for those.
Of our democracy, because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on.
Because Democrats, progressives, burn down cities, break down buildings, they attack people every time they don't get what they want.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed. Those people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus.
But Trump is correct.
Living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes.
They could have just done an audit. It would be done. That's all we needed. States could do an audit, except Democrats refused.
The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve.
And none of those states did an audit.
Old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
How?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that.
That's why New York State, California, Georgia, Wisconsin, that none of them did audits That's why they refused. They flat out absolutely refused. She's just making this up.
That I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
You mean they're not laughing at Joe Biden, who can't walk off of a stage without help? Please, let's be realistic.
To then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost.
He has also won several. We do know that, like in Georgia and in Ohio, that the changes to election law that were made were overruled by the courts and said they were unconstitutional. But the votes didn't change.
That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world...
By the way, let me just take a quick second here. Even if Donald Trump does or does not believe that he lost an election, how does that suppress the 2024 election? That's the question asked by ABC. Is Donald Trump's belief about the result of an election, how does that stop a black person and a Hispanic, a woman, anyone in America from voting? How is it suppressing the vote? Kamala Harris never answered that, and I don't even know how you can answer that. It makes no sense. How does Donald Trump's belief have to stop someone else anywhere in America from being able to vote? That's the question that was asked. It makes no sense.
Is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office.
True.
And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running.
It's true.
I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain.
20,000 of those Palestinians are Hamas. They're fighters.
In the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert.
True.
Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would.
22 Americans taken hostage.
And how it does so matters.
What about the Americans?
Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed.
What about the Americans? Screw the Palestinians.
Children,
what
mothers.
about the Americans?
What we know is that this war must end.
Why didn't she mention the Americans?
End immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out.
And Hamas has to say yes, that's it.
Around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution.
Why doesn't she do that now? And you can't have two states when one of them wants genocide, which is Hamas.
Israel and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose.
She just lost Dearborn, Michigan.
Must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She
That's
refused
true.
to be there
She
because
did.
she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates
was
Israel.
there, yes.
If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas.
They have taken over a dozen sanctions off because they wanted the Iran nuclear deal.
And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen.
Yep.
Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris,
Quite
he says you
possibly.
hate
You could.
Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying
don't know
to,
about
again,
that.
divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign
is not
policy.
known.
It is well
Not
known
at
that he
all.
admires dictators, wants to be a dictator
That
on
is
day
not
one,
known
according
at
to
all.
himself.
That is what.
It
That's
is
a
well
feeling that
known
Democrats have.
that he said
That's not
of
known.
Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine.
That is not correct.
It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant.
But Putin went into the Ukraine under the Biden-Harris administration, not the Trump administration.
That these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again.
But these dictators and autocrats didn't do anything under the Trump administration. They did it under the Biden-Harris administration, if not the Obama-Biden administration.
Who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that
Now
we
she's trying
have to
to
have a
get
president who
Trump's
is not
emotions. She's trying
consistently
to get him
weak
emotionally
and
active.
wrong on
Vice
national
President
security,
Harris.
including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice
The
President.
disgrace line was about trying to get Trump emotionally involved, to attack him.
Or national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are.
Yes.
They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much
he's
more of this
right.
historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Okay, so they're going to a quick break. Let me try and address this real quick. So what we have seen so far, I think, has been very clear. We've seen that Kamala Harris has been dodging a lot of the questions. She's been trying to make it about Orange Man bad, but she hasn't qualified it. She didn't want to answer about whether or not the economy was better under Trump, because empirically the answer is it was. She doesn't want to say, well, if her plan about Gaza is so much better, Why is Biden not using her plan? Why aren't they doing that? Why didn't they get the hostages back already? She doesn't want to answer that. She's trying to distract away from that. She's trying to say that Trump, most people, most reasonable people agree that the Trump administration, Donald Trump was railroaded by New York State, Letitia James, by Fannie Willis, by Alvin Bragg, that those were made up charges just to attack a political opponent. Most people have agreed with that across America, regardless of your political affiliation. So these are things that we have seen. To say that Donald Trump is weak, these are countries that were terrified that there would be World War III. Weak people don't start wars, even though, by the way, Donald Trump didn't start any wars. Again, all of the wars happened under the Biden-Harris administration, if not the Obama-Biden administration. You know, we have an unofficial war with the Houthis in the Red Sea right now, where we have a proxy war with Ukraine and Russia, where I don't even know what you could say what's going on with Iran right now, but Hamas they have 19 American hostages. No, she didn't mention 19 Americans were taken hostage, 34 were killed. And since that time, since October 7th of 2023, we have had 3 more Americans killed by Hamas. That is a fact, including the most recent 2 weeks ago, where Hamas, rather than letting an American hostage free, shot him in the head. So I don't understand what Kamala Harris is talking about, but I do know that Donald Trump has been very effective looking separate of the acting, and we have seen a lot of acting based on the emotions of of Kamala Harris. We've seen her overacting a lot, but separate of that, we have seen several times when Donald Trump is talking about the policies of Kamala Harris, the flip-flops of Kamala Harris, we have seen that she has had anger in her eyes, anger in her face, and she didn't have answers for these things. She really hated when Donald Trump said, "Excuse me, I'm talking." She did not like when he said that. She got very, very angry about that. But that is what we're seeing. I think Donald Trump is absolutely winning this. He is looking more presidential. He is being more substantive than what we're seeing from Kamala Harris. And he has better plans than what Kamala Harris is presenting to the American people. She keeps saying, I will be great. Then why aren't you great now? That her plans are so wonderful. Why aren't they in place now? She doesn't have an answer for any of that. And her policies don't make sense if you analyze them. But we do have a track record of Trump continuing, if he has policies in the past, which we were told could never work, did work. So continuing those policies have a high likelihood of working in the future. So we are getting answers. Now, this is what I am getting from this so far. We're about halfway through. I want to see what everyone else says. I do see your comments there, Grace. I thank you for your comments. But I think you're right. I think she is out of her league. But I also don't think that she was intended to win. Democrats were expecting this outcome, and she's not there to win. She's there to motivate Democrats to vote for Congress and Senate, to vote Democrats straight down the line. That's what they have her there for. So if she can do well, they're happy. But if she doesn't, it's okay, because what they're really looking for is holding on to their power in Congress and Senate, not to win the presidency. That's what I truly believe this is all about. And all she needs to do is look good enough. She doesn't have to actually be good enough. That's what I believe is happening here. But I do believe she's losing this. And I guarantee you will hear MSNBC say that she won. She isn't. Let's go back. They're back now, and here we go.
We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives. that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more.
Yes.
Because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden
Yes.
and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look
That
at what's
was funny.
happening.
She laughed.
We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to
Yes.
get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here...
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question,
Good point.
do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for
Why is
Ukraine in
Ukraine-
this moment, but also
How
as
is that
Commander-in-Chief,
in America's
if
best
elected,
interest?
how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me.
Hard to tell.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here.
That isn't what he
I
just said.
actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded.
Which would go to the fact that they don't have any faith in you. They don't trust you. They don't fear you.
National rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
They're a broken country.
And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president,
Poland is
and that
not
we
thankful about
understand
that.
the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO.
That is not true.
And what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and Please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started.
That's right.
3 days later, he went in and he started the war.
That's true.
Because everything they said
That is a
was
fact.
weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary.
fact.
They sent her in to negotiate with
That is a fact.
Zelensky and Putin. And she did.
That is a
and the
fact.
war started 3 days later.
Vice
And
President.
that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent
Look at
her in
South
to
Korea.
negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something.
It's true.
You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow.
She was sent
And that is
into
another
Europe
one.
to negotiate.
When I
That
went
is a
to
fact.
meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5
and
times.
you were talking to
The
by
reality is,
proxy
it has
to
been
Russia.
about
Yes, you were.
standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms,
Then you
as
failed.
a leader who shows strength, understanding
Then
that
you
the
failed.
alliances we have around the world are
Then your display of
dependent on our
strength
ability
failed.
to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about
failed,
democracy.
Kamala Harris.
And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief, and the American
Where is
people
he?
have a right to
Where is
rely
he?
on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility
You don't.
in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate.
We should.
I want to move on to
critical.
Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic
No, I don't-
withdrawal from Afghanistan.
yeah,
I
Grace,
do
I
want to
don't
ask
think
the
she knows
Vice
who
President,
Macron is.
do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Yes.
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a
and
result,
look how he did it.
America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war.
Wait a minute. What?
And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any
there's
war zone
5,000
around the
American
world the first time
citizens
this
that are in
century.
Afghanistan
But
and
let's
can't go
understand
home.
how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He
And-
calls himself a deal
and
maker.
Biden
Even his
Harris
national
executed
security
that deal.
advisor
You could've
said
made a new
it was
deal.
a weak, terrible deal. And
You
here's
didn't
how
have
it
to
went
go
down.
with the deal.
He bypassed the Afghan government. He
It doesn't matter.
negotiated directly with a terrorist organization
You
called the
didn't have to follow
Taliban.
the deal.
The
You
negotiation
killed
involved the
deals
Taliban
that
getting
Trump made
5,000
before. You could've
terrorists,
killed
Taliban
the-
terrorists released.
The Afghanistan deal could have been killed by the Biden-Harris administration if they thought it was that bad. They didn't. The Biden administration took out the troops but left 5,000 Americans in Afghanistan and abandoned them. They're still there. So she's not being accurate.
And receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility.
This is why he had the Abraham Accords. There were no new wars, because he doesn't understand the responsibility. She's out of her mind.
How he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military.
No, he has not. That has been debunked. It's a lie.
The strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
She dodged, by the way.
If you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left
5,000.
We wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, 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 and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal and, in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you.
That's absolutely true.
I want to move on now to race and politics in this country.
No, you
Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career,
that's a pitiful answer,
attempted to use race to divide the American people.
No, he didn't.
You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5.
Yeah, at the time he thought they
took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States.
Actually, that was Hillary Clinton who did that.
And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people?
Democrats live and die on the race card, And she has used the race card in her Senate race, in her AG race. She was East Indian, and she emphasized that. And when she ran for presidency, she was black. She emphasized that. So she has flip-flopped on it. It's her issue.
Decisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things.
By the way, let me also add in there is a difference between black, as America uses the term, and African American. In America, black equals African American. They're synonymous. That's not the way the world looks at it. Black means black by descent, as in African. It does not mean African American. And we have seen Kamala Harris has pushed herself as if she is African American, not black. There are differences in there.
World, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And
Then
what
you
I
have
do
nothing.
offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
Then you have
One
no
who
influence.
believes in what is.
But you are vice president. So do you have any power whatsoever? Are you not culpable for anything?
The American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk.
No, you don't have a plan. You're throwing money at people. That's it. Not the same thing.
I have a plan
No, you don't.
to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation,
just
their
throwing
ideas,
money at
their
the
hard
problem.
work.
That
I have a
doesn't fix
plan,
the issues.
$6,000
Not the same thing.
for young families for the first year of your.
That's inflationary. That hurts people, makes them more poor. That's not a plan. That's throwing money at it.
That is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000.
That's inflationary. It's not fixing the problem. It doesn't help anyone. Again, you're throwing money at the problem. That's not a solution.
Opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay. Thank
you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
no, the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I
going
just
to
need
move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he
President
has said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to
Cut her off.
repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today.
True.
And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up, they wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones, too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if
Fair point.
we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff.
Red flag laws do, in fact,
as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time. When I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up.
Did you read the Affordable Care Act, all 2,000 pages of it? Do you know that the Affordable Care Act to this day still has not been instituted in full? So, yeah, we should have repealed it.
Late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this
Then why didn't you do it already?
is that access to health care
Why didn't you
should
go
be
to
a
Joe Biden
right
and do it?
and not just a privilege of those who
didn't you
can
get on the
afford it.
national news and
And
do it?
the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Why in the
Pass
last
this
45
pro
years
law
have you not
in terms of where
offered this
Donald Trump
plan?
stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a
She
lot
made a
of...
mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to give. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said the climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue.
No, you can't.
And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800.
And China has increased more greenhouse gases than the United States has reduced. And the United States has reduced more greenhouse gases than all of Europe and England combined. That is a fact, true every year since 2015.
And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine.
True.
They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate.
Okay, so we saw in that second section, we really need an entire debate on foreign policy. That's what America really needs. And we need clear plans on foreign policy, because we are facing, it's not World War III. That's sensationalism. What we are facing, though, is 3 regional wars, or call it polywars, wars that are simultaneously happening across the globe by major powers. We're talking about China in the Southeast Asia. We're talking about Iran in the Middle East. We're talking about Russia in Europe. And that is something that is a problem. That is something that is a reality, and it is growing. We have right now, and we should call it this, we have a unofficial war that is happening in the Red Sea. It's been going on since January, when the Biden administration first started to fight the Houthis, who are using the money that they got from Joe Biden when he gave them a humanitarian aid in February of 2021. They're using that money. They bought rockets, and they're using those rockets against the U.S. and our allies in the Red Sea. That's an unofficial war. We need to have a conversation about that. Joe Biden lied to the American people on September 1st, 2021, and said he brought everyone home except 100 people. That is a factual lie. We know that after that, by January of 2022, over 1,000 Americans came back home, not 100, and Joe Biden stopped talking about it because there was another 5,000 Americans still in Afghanistan that he left behind, besides the $85 billion in ammunition and goods. That is a failure, and Kamala Harris said nothing about these things. She has been ineffective at them. She did go into Europe, and she was talking to Russia and was speaking with Zelensky and the Ukraine 3 to 5 days before the war started, and Russia ignored her because they did not fear her, they did not respect her. I have been following international politics for 20 years. I'm very familiar about this, and every week I do a component of that when I do my Sunday live stream, and I've been talking about these issues long term. And when she says, oh, no one's going after your guns, that is a lie. That is an absolute lie. Red flag laws is an attempt to take firearms away from American citizens without a crime ever being committed. That is a fact. It's true in 20 states. 20 states and Washington, D.C. as we speak. No crime is committed, and you will lose your firearm and your right to the Second Amendment. That is something she supports. So she is lying to the American people. It is really insulting that we have seen this. Grace, thank you for the comments, by the way. I am following you. You want to take out, they're talking about the green policies and the Green New Deal, but they leave out the fact that before the Green New Deal and all those issues, the United States is the largest nation leading the world in the reduction of greenhouse gases. We reduce more greenhouse gases than all of Europe and England combined by 3 times. But China by itself creates more greenhouse gases than the United States reduces. So does India. So does the continent of Africa. So those 3 areas, it doesn't matter. So they keep saying, well, we'll just be green and it'll be fine. It doesn't work. It's not effective. We've built those solar plants. We've built the wind farms. We've been building the hydro, and it doesn't work. That's why the economic, if you look at the green energy plan for New York State with green energy moving to all electric, we know that by 2033, we have no idea where the energy is coming from, but we know we will need more, and green energy will not be enough. Same thing for California. That is a fact. Talk to the Department of Energy in New York State. They will confirm that for you. So let's go back. They're back now.
Open the phone lines as the debate ends to get your reaction.
They're not back yet?
Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight 2 very different visions for our country.
One vision.
One that is
and
focused on
one
the future,
promise.
and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back.
Again,
And
that
I do
slogan.
believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and we can chart a new way forward.
No.
And a vision
not
of
what you're
that
offering.
includes having a plan, understanding the
You don't have a plan.
aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small
What?
businesses, in new families,
An
in what we
opportunity
can do
economy?
around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living.
That's not your
I
plans.
believe
That's not
in
what your
what we
plans
can do together. That is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve,
We lost that
including
with Joe Biden being a
respecting
zombie
our military
president.
and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental
won't.
rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do.
That's not a federal
I'll tell
issue.
you, I started my career as
Nor
a
is it all right.
prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general,
No one
a
cares.
United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat?
But you
The
did
only
keep
thing
them
I
in
ever
jail
asked
after
them,
they were
are you
sentenced.
okay?
They were free.
And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first.
Yes, you do.
I intend to be a president for all Americans.
No, you don't.
And focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by
No one
investing
believes that
right
you think
now
that way.
in you, the
No
American
one,
people.
Not even other Democrats.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5
Simple
years
answer.
to
Simple
fix
thing.
the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like We're not going to frack. We're not going to take fossil fuel. We're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National.
Okay. So I hope I wasn't too obtrusive as I was covering this debate with you guys. I think, and I'm trying to be very empirical here. It's not just because I don't like Kamala Harris. It's really not. It's not that I don't like Democrats. She doesn't have policies. Her policies are throw money at the problem. That's not a solution. It hasn't worked in the past. It won't work in the future. She's trying to reinvent herself in front of us. She has flip-flopped on almost every major policy that she has had, that we have seen in 2019, that in 2020. She has continuously done and said whatever it takes to be able to get to the next level, to get that next promotion. She is a DEI candidate, and we see the result of that. She is not well respected around the world. Just ask the current and the prior Prime Minister, President of South Korea, what they think of her when she embarrassed the United States. They left out the fact that 16,000 Americans were abandoned in the Sudan by the Biden-Harris administration. No one wants to talk about that. And when she keeps saying, but I'm not president, that doesn't excuse Kamala Harris. You are vice president. You have access to the president. You can push a policy on your own. You can influence the nation. You can get on TV any day of the week and do something to try and push an agenda. She chose not to. In the United States, remember when it came to the Tennessee trans shooting, when 3 children were gunned down by a individual who was a trans maniac, killed 3 children. Guess what? She went to Tennessee not to see the parents of those 3 dead 9-year-old children. She went instead to protect the Democrat Party, because Democrats in the state legislature of Tennessee broke Tennessee law and were being punished, and she went to protect them. She went out, and instead of telling the American people that Joe Biden is a zombie part-time president, she went out and she raised money telling everyone that Joe Biden was brilliant. She did not. She dodged question after question after question tonight. She tried to make this about Orange Man bad, and she wasn't good at doing that. She obviously has been trained to act. We can see it by the emphasis of her emotions as she's trying to react to Donald Trump to get him to try and, I don't know what kind of reaction she wanted from him. It didn't happen. But he definitely hit her nerves and pissed her off several times throughout the entire debate. And she was the one who was trying to talk when the microphones were turned off. She was the one who was trying to speak while Donald Trump was speaking, not the other way around. She did not look presidential. Donald Trump did. Now, these are empirical, I believe. These are all empirically true things, as well as many of the details as we were going through the debate that I was pointing out. I think it's empirically correct to say that Donald Trump won this debate. I think it is empirically correct to say that Kamala Harris looks weak. I think that is absolutely correct. You may not agree. I again ask everyone, I need to take my dog out now. He's been waiting throughout this entire thing to go. So I just want to say to everyone, please, in the comments, tell me, who do you think won? I will talk about this later in the week. I will go over this on Sunday during Sunday live stream. I probably will be speaking about this tomorrow with the Liberty First Foundation at 7 p.m. But I want to hear what you think. I think Donald Trump absolutely won. I think he made his case. I don't think Kamala Harris did. I think you will see the results, that we will continue to see her do poorly in the polls going forward. But I don't think the Democrat Party cares, because her goal wasn't to win the election. Her goal was to maintain Congress and the Senate. And that's what she's trying to do. But you tell me what you think in the comments. I thank everyone for joining me for this debate. I look forward to seeing your comments near term.